All right, welcome back to Tarabella Podcast Studio, or this Drivecast Studio. It's Wednesday night, a little early for my Thursday night podcast, but I'm driving and I'm like, this is going to be crazy. The day's way backed up from our schedule. Let's get this podcast out. Today's topic, we're going to address fermentation, carboys, the history of it, and obviously the different practices in different industries, and a lot of the importance that's placed on it, true or not true, and maybe some other fun topics. When you go ahead and you make a spirit, right? Spirit is always a sugar that's distilled. You need time, which is for the yeast to work its wonders, for the yeast to eat the sugar, be it green sugar, regular sugar, sacks of sugar, which is, how you make moonshine, very often you add in sugar, or whatever the other sugar source is. You take it, you mix it with water, and you let it ferment. You throw the yeast in between 60 and generally it's between 65 and 72 degrees. You wait a day or two or three, depending on, again, the yeast and the sugar content. And then it's alcoholic beverage known as beer, and then you distill. Quite simple, but very complex. Because you are now creating something that's a totally new and unique beverage. The standard operations of most distilleries is to use stainless steel. Stainless steel is very, very easy to work with. You're going to go ahead and take, in between runs, sanitize, and after you sanitize, you're good. You have a yeast, you throw in the yeast, ferment it every single time, over and over and over, a fresh packet of yeast, and continue, yalla. However, as with everything, it's always an artisanal and unique aspect. One could be what they call a sourdough mash. A sourdough mash is you don't really take a lab-controlled yeast. You take a yeast from previous beer, and you throw it in. It's actually very interesting. There's a discussion in Jewish law. If this yeast remainder that you took from the previous beer, often it's from what fell down to the bottom, you'll see it if you look closely. If what its status in regards to the prohibition of having leavened bread in your house on Passover or a beverage made from it. Anyways, I'm getting sidetracked. So that it will be your first, off-color, if you want to say, process. Another off-color process is very often used in the tequila world, and that is using wood, tremendous wood vats to ferment it. Now, these wood vats are porous. Wood is porous. A porous vat will have yeast inhabit in its pores, and that too can affect the taste. Interesting. The old vats used for tequila are not American oak. It's a different tree. It's not used anymore. But that's just another very fascinating thing in the tequila industry. Obviously, I would love to get my hands on such a bottle and try it. If any of my fans out there, let me know if you have such a bottle. And if you're not my fan too, I would love to have that bottle. Another very important thing to know is everything I said so far is true in regards to ordinary spirits. However, there are other spirits out there that have different rules, and those are what we would call fruity spirits. Spirits made from fruits. Lots of tradition over there. The easiest one to pick on is wine. Where do you ferment your wine? Do you ferment it in a barrel? Do you ferment it out of the barrel? Barrel is oak. Do you use a new oak barrel? Barrels can be used for the 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8 times. Usually you get like 4 years and it's still giving you an oaky flavor. Solaras can have barrels. Solaras are a process of aging in Spain, but has become more and more accepted throughout the world. It helps keep a consistency of taste. That you stack barrels. The oldest barrels are the bottom row. The youngest barrels are the top row. And you have like a rubber hose, and you rotate the alcohol. Every time you remove a bottle, you remove the bottle from, say, barrel number 1. Then you take a third from barrel number 2, put it into barrel number 1. You're never allowed to remove more than a third from the barrel. Then you take a barrel number 3 and put in barrel number 2, and it keeps on mixing round and round and round until you get to barrel number 1, which you fill up. So that is the Solera system. That will have an effect, obviously, in aging, but that's not wine, I'm sorry. Wine, then you have the Flora, a lot of the sherry wine, which is often Solera, and others, it ferments in the barrel. There's actually some really cool barrels that have a glass front that you can watch the fermentation. Wine, you usually want to tap off on into the barrel, so there should be space. The exception to that is sherry. Another very prevalent, it used to be very prevalent, fermentation is earthenware. It's actually today very common in Armenia. They use that for wine. For the most part, these are the standard practices of fermentation. You know, universally, everything's made out of today is steel, except for the one exception is the 6,000 liter vats of using tequila, because the fermentation does not really play such a tremendous role in the taste, and you just don't want to run the loss that could be entailed if your whiskey or at this point your beer brew goes bad. The next step is very, very, very important. What your material of your whiskey still is, and of course the shape. Fermentation, it doesn't make a difference what shape the vat is, unless you're trying to sell a product, and you could say it's long fermentation, short fermentation, exposure to the air. I mean, you don't want exposure in a fermentation tank, just like beer that has an oxidation. So you want it tall and not wide, but either which way, you're not going to have oxidation. You're going to want to seal it, and you want to control the environment to get your taste. Next is your transfer to the whiskey still. A whiskey still is a very simple experiment to see what it is if you have a crock pot, or really any pot, turn it on low, put on the cover, you'll see droplets on the underside of the cover. That is what a whiskey still does. It makes the alcohol travel upwards, and the water will drop downwards. It's heavier. You know, it's not really this week's introduction. It'll be next week's. Next week we'll go ahead and we'll discuss the 4 main types, the four most utilized types of whiskey distilleries, and from there possibly move on to barrels. Again, thank you very much, everybody, for listening. It was a pleasure. I love doing this, and I can't wait until tomorrow. I'm sure there's going to be a lot, like every day, on my plate. And just a nice shout out to you corporations that have joined the Tarabello family, and we are doing your gifting in South Wales. Thank you very much. We are humbled, and we look forward to meeting and beating all your expectations. And if you have not yet joined, please reach out, 551-238-7791. I deeply appreciate it. Thank you, and enjoy your evening. See you tomorrow.